The FBI looked into the possibility that It's a Wonderful Life was communist propaganda, but they overlooked something much more startling: the sequence in which George's automobile travels on its own between shots. We're showing you the astounding errors that will forever alter the way you see this Christmas classic, from magic wreaths to disappearing pipes. You'll be surprised that no one saw the last one because it's so clear. It's a Wonderful Life story started long before Hollywood took notice. Author and historian Philip Van Doren Stern penned a short fiction titled The Greatest Gift in November 1939. One Christmas Eve, a man named George Pratt stood on a bridge, prepared to take his own life. He had the opportunity to view what the world would have been like if he had never been born, but before he could jump, a mystery stranger showed up. Everything changed with what George witnessed. He became aware of his significance to those around him. Stern thought the narrative was good, but no publisher wanted to buy it. In 1943, he made the decision to print 200 copies himself after years of refusal. He distributed them as Christmas cards to friends and family rather than selling them. Eventually, one of those cards fell into the hands of an agent, who took it to Hollywood. In an attempt to make it a Cary Grant movie, RKO Pictures saw potential and paid $10,000 for the rights. However, there was a problem. The core of Stern's story was not encapsulated in any of the screenplays that were prepared. RKO gave up before the end of 1945 and chose to sell the rights. At that point, Frank Capra took over. He had recently returned from World War II service and was seeking a worthwhile endeavor. He recognized who should play the lead right away and paid the same $10,000 that RKO had for the rights. James Stewart, a distinguished combat pilot, had returned from service and was looking for a meaningful position. Capra was not simply another movie star. He had directed a number of American propaganda movies during the conflict. Why We Fight was the Army's name. He was altered by the encounter. His goal when he got back to Hollywood was to create inspirational films. So, in 1945, he and other filmmakers George Stevens and William Wyler established Liberty Films, a standalone business that could function without studio intervention. Their first significant endeavor became It's a Wonderful Life. However, it was not an easy film to make. Because Liberty Films was a fledgling company, funding a large project was extremely risky. The expenses swiftly increased to $3.78 million after they borrowed $1.54 million from Bank of America. Capra had faith in the story, but it was a risk for a studio that had never released a movie before. His experiences during World War II influenced James Stewart's portrayal of George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. As a B-24 bomber pilot, he flew 20 combat missions over Nazi-occupied Europe, making him the first well-known Hollywood celebrity to enlist following Pearl Harbor. His performance reflects the impact of the war on him. As obligations mount, George's initial optimism and desire to leave Bedford Falls give way to frustration and tiredness. When Stewart approaches the bridge, he is thinking about ending his life, but he does more than just act. He feels like a man who has reached his limit. What many servicemen went through after returning home was represented in his unvarnished, passionate performance. There is more to Donna Reed's Mary Hatch than merely a romantic interest. When things go wrong, she keeps the family together because she recognizes George's potential before he does. Reed gave Mary agency and strength at an era when female characters were frequently one-dimensional. She went on to become a cultural legend off-screen in The Donna Reed Show. But her depth as an actress was demonstrated in this part. Mr. Potter, played by Lionel Barrymore, is among the best villains in movies. He is merciless and cold, a symbol of corruption and avarice. Potter takes Uncle Billy's $8,000 without question after he loses it, almost pushing George to commit suicide. Due to his physical limitations, Barrymore, who has arthritis and is confined to a wheelchair, made Potter even more frightening. As George's guardian angel, Clarence, played by Henry Travers, offers warmth and comedy. Despite his lack of strength and wisdom, he is always kind. He helps George see his value by presenting him with a world in which he never existed. He concluded by saying that a man with friends is never a failure. Sums up the theme of the movie. A significant advancement in cinema effects resulted from the task of making snow appear realistic in It's a Wonderful Life. The majority of 1946 films featured bleached cornflakes in place of snow. Although they caused a significant issue, they appeared attractive on camera. Actors created a loud crunching sound with every stride, making dialogue recording hard. Additionally, they did not act like actual snow. There are no tire tracks or footprints. For a better approach, director Frank Capra turned to special effects artist Russell Shearman after realizing this wouldn't work. The RKO effects crew and Shearman created something entirely original. They employed a chemical called foamite, which is found in fire extinguishers, in place of cornflakes. It was combined with sugar, water, and soap flakes to make fake snow that could be sprayed onto the set. Massive fans assisted in dispersing it, resulting in a silent natural snowfall. Actors could now perform in the snow without having to re-rehearse their lines for the first time. Because of how significant this innovation was, the Motion Picture Academy gave it a special prize in 1948. However, this fresh snow has its own issues. The ground became extremely slick due to the soap-based combination, making certain areas of the set hazardous. In order to prevent mishaps, crew members had to maneuver cautiously. The invention changed the game despite this obstacle. It established a new benchmark for winter film scenes and had a lasting impact on filmmaking methods. Filming was done in the midst of a harsh summer, despite every attempt to create the ideal winter scene. California was experiencing a heat wave when It's a Wonderful Life was filmed. Temperatures reached above 90 degrees Fahrenheit and 32 degrees Celsius at RKO's Encino Ranch. The temperature was too high. During his emotional breakdown on the bridge, James Stewart, who played George Bailey, was seen perspiring in multiple scenes. Although unplanned, the heat added to the rawness and intensity of his performance. Frank Capra, the filmmaker, had to halt production for a day because of the severe circumstances. The actors and crew were worn out. This degree of heat made it much more difficult to shoot a Christmas movie in the middle of summer. Nevertheless, Capra persisted, committed to realizing his dream. Stewart had all but given up on the part. Upon his return from World War II, he was uncertain about his desire to continue performing. The actor who played Mr. Potter, Lionel Barrymore, was the one who persuaded him to accept the role. Looking back, Stewart subsequently referred to It's a Wonderful Life as his favorite movie of his six-decade career. Capra had the entire set created from scratch to give Bedford Falls the impression of a real town. 2 months were spent on the building and spanned RKO's Encino Ranch's 4 acres. With their vintage stores and character-filled residences, over 70 buildings were intended to appear lived in. The length of the main street was 300 yards, or 3 city blocks. The set also featured a factory sector and a parkway lined with 20 mature oak trees that were put into the property. For an American movie at the time, it was one of the biggest and most intricate sets ever constructed. Capra aimed to give Bedford Falls the impression that it had been there for many years in order to increase reality. To make them appear weathered, the buildings were meticulously aged. Old signage, deteriorated sidewalks, and recognizable small-town accents were among the details that gave the town life. It was worth the effort. Bedford Falls seemed authentic, as if it could truly exist, to viewers of It's a Wonderful Life. But it was a short-lived town. Developers purchased the Encino Ranch from RKO by the 1950s. The majority of the Bedford Falls set was demolished to provide room for new homes. There are now just 2 of the movie's locales left. The renowned dance scene swimming pool still exists at Beverly Hills High School. In La Cagnata, Flintridge, Martini's home is still standing. Everything else has vanished. Errors occur in even the most meticulously produced movies, and It's a Wonderful Life is no exception. This 1946 holiday favorite has many touching moments. However, if you examine it carefully, you'll also discover some unexpected errors. Some are humorous, while others were just by chance that made the final cut. And some are just nonsensical. The Charleston dancing contest is where one of the most hilarious gaffes occurs. Mary Hatch and George Bailey are so engrossed in the excitement that they are totally unaware that the gym floor underneath them is going to open. People are already slipping into the secret swimming pool, making the situation chaotic. The majority of spectators, however, never notice one thing. His toupee momentarily looks out of place as James Stewart climbs out of the water. Stewart, who was in his late 30s by 1946, had begun to depend on hairpieces to keep his leading man appearance. The rapid movement in damp hair must have been too much for the toupee to handle. His actual hairline is also briefly apparent. However, because there is so much going on in the scene, the error is overlooked. Filmmaker Frank Capra had a reputation for overlooking minor flaws as long as they heightened the mood of a scene. This one remained in as well. Then there's Uncle Billy's well-known blunder, which included an unanticipated financial bonus. George and Uncle Billy have just concluded a talk as the scenario begins. There's a big collision off-screen as Uncle Billy starts to stagger away intoxicated. There was no plan for the loudness. Some props had been inadvertently pushed over by a crew member, making a tremendous commotion. Thomas Mitchell, who played Uncle Billy, however, responded immediately rather than deviating from his role. Slurring, "I'm fine," he said. I continued to walk and am doing okay. Because the remark was so appropriate for his character, Capra chose to keep it in. It felt so natural to him that he offered the crew member who caused the accident a $10 bonus, which is almost $150 in today's currency. This fortunate incident enhanced Uncle Billy's likability and demonstrated that sometimes the most memorable scenes in films occur by accident. Not all of the movie's mistakes were as amusing. Some, like the pipe that vanished, were just odd. In one scenario, Violet Bick is speaking with George Bailey in the building and loan office. Holding a pipe in his lips, he listens to her. But the pipe is abruptly gone as he reaches for cash to give her. Just gone, with no explanation or transition. Because scenes were occasionally filmed out of order and at various periods, continuity problems like this one sometimes occurred in vintage movies. Stewart was most likely not given the pipe again by someone on set, and the error was overlooked by editors. It's a minor detail, but once you see it, you can't get it out of your head. Then there is the illogical ice cream. Mary Hatch explicitly states that she does not want an ice cream dish with coconut on top, but early in the film, young George Bailey offers it to her. What comes next is much crazier than what's already funny. A phone call from Mr. Gower confirms that George's mission takes more than an hour. Mary is still seated at the counter, however, and her ice cream is still identical when he gets back. A flawless frozen scoop without any melting or puddles. This error most likely resulted from scenes being shot separately and no one considering substituting a melting ice cream for the original. The level of continuity monitoring was lower in 1946 than it is now. As a result, little things like these occasionally get overlooked. For contemporary audiences, however, it serves as a humorous reminder that even vintage movies have their peculiarities. In addition, there is an odd background noise during George Bailey's stressful encounter with Mr. Potter. Through the glass, a contemporary automobile with a chrome door handle is plainly visible as George leans over Potter's desk. The setting of It's a Wonderful Life is the 1910s to 1940s, thus this wouldn't be a problem in most movies. It is evident that this was a mistake because chrome-plated cars with these features were uncommon until the late 1940s or early 1950s. The Bedford Falls setting is expertly crafted in the movie. Every element, including the props and clothes, feels true to the period. Frank Capra, the director, ensured that the town resembled small-town America from earlier decades. But this automobile managed to get into the picture, destroying the delusion for anyone who observes. Either the studio lot or a nearby street utilized for outside shooting was probably where it was parked. Filmmakers were not in complete control of every aspect of the background, particularly when filming in semi-public spaces. Although this error was overlooked for years, people who enjoy picking up on little nuances now find it to be a favorite. Rather than detracting from the environment, it brings a surprising appeal. And it's ironic in a way. An automobile from the future waits outside while George begs for another opportunity, seemingly serving as a reminder that time never stops. A new type of error occurs in the last moments of the film. George, holding a Christmas wreath, dashes into the building in loan office. Before taking the phone, he puts it on a table. However, it is back on his arm in the following picture as though it had never been moved. It is not touched. No one returns it. It's simply back there. Movies frequently have continuity mistakes like this, particularly when scenes are filmed out of order. Someone might have forgotten where the wreath was intended to be during the reshoot. This type of editing error is common, but it's strangely appropriate. Some admirers even make jokes about Clarence. The wreath reappeared out of nowhere, accompanied by George's guardian angel. After all, it is nothing to move a Christmas wreath if he has the ability to go back in time. One of the most poignant scenes included yet another error. George loses his temper with his family due to stress. He yells, ruffles his hair, and kicks things out of frustration. He's under a lot of pressure, and it's an emotional moment. However, his hair is neat and well combed in the very next picture, as if nothing had happened. This error most likely occurred as a result of the scene being assembled using various takes. It is common for actresses to have their hair and cosmetics adjusted in between takes. Here, however, someone made an excessive correction. It's a minor detail, but it provides an unexpected humorous moment for those who notice. Just a moment. George seemed to be in utter disarray. He appears to have just left the barbershop the following time. It doesn't detract from the scenario, though. The difficulty of maintaining flawless continuity, particularly during high-energy moments, is perhaps what it serves as a reminder of. It also enhances the movie's allure. Ultimately, who wouldn't want their issues to go away as quickly as George's untidy hair? During an early scene at Mr. Gower's drugstore, one of the most subtle blunders is made. It's a charming moment, with young Mary leaning down to speak to young George about their impending relationship. However, a tiny piece of tape that doesn't belong on the counter is there. This was not included in the collection. It served as a marker to indicate to the performers exactly where they were to stand. To ensure that participants reached their marks, filmmakers frequently employ them for the ideal camera angles and lighting conditions. Usually, they are taken out before filming, but this one was left in place. Fixing errors like this was difficult in 1946, when Wonderful Life was created. In the past, correcting a mistake required reshooting the entire scene, but today, digital tools can remove minute elements. In the finished cut, this tape marking remained, providing an uncommon inside look at the heyday of Hollywood. One of the film's most glaring continuity mistakes occurs during George Bailey's crash sequence in It's a Wonderful Life. When all else fails, he crashes his car into a tree close to Martini's house. When we initially witness the collision, both headlights are still in place and the automobile is directly up against the tree. However, a change occurs in the subsequent shots. One of the headlights is now gone, and the car has shifted slightly to the side. It's the sort of error that, once you see it, stands out. Although the sequence is already powerful and depicts George at his lowest moment, the moving car detracts from the effect and leaves you wondering how it was missed in the editing. Some people think that technical constraints on the set or reshoots are to blame for this. No formal justification has ever been provided. The circumstances of the filming, however, might have contributed. In the summer of 1946, when temperatures rose to 90 degrees, this image was captured. Despite the heat, the production team had to create a winter scene by making fake snow out of a mixture of soap flakes, water, sugar, and fomite. The Academy gave this procedure a technical award because it was so sophisticated. However, it wasn't easy working in these conditions. Small continuity issues like this one might have been brought on by the intense heat and the difficulties of managing fake snow. Despite its flaws, the movie is nevertheless adored by viewers. These minor mistakes add character rather than detract from the experience. Many people view them as a throwback to the days when movies were produced without digital edits, using real sets and practical effects. One of the film's most emotional scenes features yet another error. When Clarence plunges into the icy river, George is compelled to rescue him. Something is wrong as Clarence screams for assistance as George paddles toward him. He does not open his mouth while the cries are heard. Despite the fact that the moment is meant to be serious, the audio and graphics are completely out of sync, giving it an odd air. This error most likely occurred as a result of the 1946 sound recording method. Due to the unreliability of live audio, particularly in outdoor or aquatic settings, performers frequently recorded their lines in a studio afterwards. Clarence's sobs were likely added in post-production in this instance, but they weren't precisely synced with his mouth motions. Although it is a minor error, it is noticeable at such a critical juncture. The reason most viewers don't mind is Clarence is a very popular figure. He is portrayed by Henry Travers and adds humor and humanity to the narrative, which makes it simple to ignore technical difficulties. There is more intriguing activity taking place behind the scenes, even in this moment. There wasn't any snowfall. An artificial snow supply of 6,000 gallons was used to construct it. For snow, the majority of movies at the period used painted cornflakes. For situations with dialogue, that approach was excessively noisy. The quieter, more realistic alternative that the special effects team developed ultimately changed the way that winter scenes were produced in Hollywood. The age of Harry Bailey is another odd contradiction in the movie. Harry drowned as a child because no one was there to save him, Clarence reveals when he shows George what life would have been like if he had never been born. According to him, Harry was 9 years old when he passed away. However, the dates don't match when Harry's tombstone is shown by the camera. Given that he was born in 1911 and passed away in 1919, he was only 7 or 8 years old. This error has been discussed for years. According to some, it was merely a script error. Some believe that Henry Travers might have misspoken his age during filming and that nobody noticed. The plot revolves around Harry's fate, thus it's unexpected that the figures don't add up. Fans have attempted to interpret it in various ways. Despite being an angel, Clarence may not be flawless when it comes to human subtleties, according to one idea. Perhaps he just miscalculated the age because he can be forgetful at times. Some believe it's simply a byproduct of the earlier filmmaking process. Movies were filmed on short notice in the 1940s, and minor mistakes weren't usually taken seriously. Among the all-time favorite Christmas films is It's a Wonderful Life. The FBI, however, believed it to be something far more threatening in 1947. An internal report at the height of Cold War paranoia described the movie as a potential case of communist infiltration in Hollywood. The explanation: the portrayal of bankers in the film was negative. The FBI identified Mr. Potter, the affluent and cunning banker, as a potential issue. They perceived his portrayal as a critique of capitalism. As per the letter, communists employed this strategy to sow disbelief in American establishments. It was believed that George Bailey's modest community bank was a better option than Mr. Potter's avarice since it supported collectivism rather than free capitalism. Concerns were taken seriously by the House Un-American Activities Committee, or WAC. The government was already blacklisting actors and filmmakers in an effort to combat alleged communist influence in Hollywood. But ultimately, WAC decided not to pursue an inquiry. It's ironic that the film's most potent themes today are community, charity, and resisting corruption, the very things that arouse doubts. The movie generated discussion for other reasons besides political issue. George Bailey's encounter with an alternate reality in which he was never born is one of the most talked about scenes. His wife, Mary, is a librarian in this alternate reality, single and quiet. As though her existence is meaningless without marriage, the movie portrays this as a tragedy. Many viewers in the modern era find this moment unnerving. It perpetuates the antiquated notion that a woman's contentment is dependent on her spouse and family. There had been previous film adaptations of the spinster librarian theme. Silent, reserved woman who is perceived as lonely and repressed. That Mary's life is meaningless without George is implied here. Some contend that the scene's purpose is not this. For them, it serves to emphasize the closeness of George and Mary's lives. It illustrates how love transforms both of them rather than implying that Mary is worthless without a husband. Despite their marriage, Mary's sacrifices are not acknowledged. She takes care of their family, helps George through all of his problems, and saves the Bailey building and loan. Mary is supposed to accept her position without question, but the plot is always about George's troubles. Beyond gender norms and politics, the movie poses a more significant query. In reality, what does it mean to lead a fulfilling life? For the most of the film, George Bailey gives up on his aspirations. His dreams include being an architect, building skyscrapers, and touring the world. He stays in Bedford Falls instead, taking up the family company and lending a hand to others. On Christmas Eve, he has his lowest moment when he feels stuck and thinks his life has been a waste. Nothing changes regarding his situation, even after his epiphany at the conclusion. He is unable to follow his dreams. He simply comes to view his sacrifices differently. The movie's message, according to some, is bittersweet. According to this theory, happiness is more about improving the lives of others than it is about achieving own goals. This concept has been associated by philosophers with objective list theories, which contend that community and relationships, rather than individual achievement, are the sources of true fulfillment. By this metric, George's life is abundantly meaningful. He assists his community, keeps families from becoming bankrupt, and is surrounded by supportive individuals. For others, however, the message is more nuanced. Some contend that the movie also serves as a warning about how society forces people to forego their aspirations in order to fulfill their obligations. Does George's moral behavior indicate that he is genuinely content? Though it comes from accepting his role rather than altering his life, his final happiness is genuine. The 1946 release of It's a Wonderful Life was anything but a hit. The movie only brought about $3.3 million globally. Just the budget for it was $3.18 million. Not to mention the expenses of distribution and marketing. The production firm that Frank Capra formed, Liberty Films, borrowed more than $1.5 million to make it. In 1947, the firm was forced to sell to Paramount Pictures when the film failed to turn a profit. The timing was a major factor in its failure. The Best Years of Our Lives had just been released a few weeks prior. The film, which was directed by William Wyler, followed World War II soldiers as they adapted to civilian life. Due to its popularity, the movie won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Despite receiving 5 nominations, It's a Wonderful Life only received 1 for its creative use of fake snow effects. Beyond rivalry, the film's themes of struggle and sacrifice failed to captivate post-war American audiences. A lot of individuals desired something that would allow them to escape reality and be more positive. Not even critics knew what to think of it. Some thought it was excessively emotional, while others valued its message of hope. they referred to it as Capricorn, rejecting its small-town optimism as impractical. Although he later acknowledged that the film's message could have been too weighty for a country still recovering from war, James Stewart did get plaudits for his portrayal of George Bailey. Capra had hoped for a great reaction, but instead it slipped into the background, a wonderful existence. However, there was at least one noteworthy accomplishment in the movie. For a long time, Hollywood had trouble making snow look genuine on screen. The painted cornflakes used in most movies were noisy and crushed underfoot, which made it hard to record conversation. Using a combination of fire extinguisher foam, sugar, and water, Capra's group created a novel technique. The outcome was silent on set and appeared authentic. Because of this innovation, the film won an Academy Award for technical accomplishment. It's a Wonderful Life's failure signaled the start of Capra's demise. Despite being one of Hollywood's most renowned filmmakers, he only produced 5 more movies following this. None of them was as successful as his previous efforts. It's a Wonderful Life appeared to be doomed to obsolescence. Then everything changed almost 30 years later. In 1974, the copyright on the movie expired due to an administrative error. All of a sudden, any TV station could broadcast it for free. Broadcasters seized the opportunity to fill airtime with a high-caliber film at no expense to them. It's a Wonderful Life was a December television program in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Those who had never seen it before were captivated by its hopeful message. Families adopted it as a Christmas custom. America's economic hardships and cultural changes gave the movie's themes of community and resiliency additional significance. By 1992, NBC had acquired exclusive rights to It's a Wonderful Life due to its immense popularity. Republic Pictures was able to partially restore copyright rights based on the short story, which served as the inspiration for the movie. Ever since, it has been broadcast on NBC on Christmas Eve. One of the most cherished holiday movies ever made was once a commercial flop. Capra was taken aback by its resuscitation. The film has a life of its own now, he once remarked. When I originally read it, I never even considered it a Christmas story.